Let us pray. Raise up, O Lord, the Spirit which animated our Holy Father, Saint Benedict, so that filled with the same Spirit we may truly love what he loved and practice what he taught. Bless St. John's Abbey with men and women who will follow in the way of Saint Benedict. Amen. I'm happy to introduce our speaker today. Probably most of you probably know him, and Abbot John perhaps received many of your oblations. But Abbot John is with us today, retired from being abbot a couple years ago, and works with development and Hispanic ministries. And he's going to be talking about talking. So without further ado, Abbot John.
Thank you. Good morning to all of you. It's good to be with you. Some of you I know personally, and others look forward to meeting you in the future. So it's great to have you here on this conversation about talking and talking as it relates to our own conversion, our daily living. Okay. Within a monastic tradition, just an enormous amount of emphasis on silence and contemplation and how to do that and do that well. But Benedict, surely in writing a rule for that most vigorous kind of monk, the Cenobite, living under a rule and an abbot and living in community, well, guess what? They have to talk to each other at least some part of the day, huh? And so what I'm trying to, with this presentation, brief as it is simply to reflect with you on the place that talking has in our spiritual living and within the monastic community. I'm coming at it from the monastic side, but I'm really trying to move it over into the realm where you, in fact, live your lives as oblates, okay? Early monastic tradition, of course, in Benedict, come out of the desert. And it's the hermit tradition. Individuals, men and women, are living alone and in solitary. Their most companion is on an everyday basis is in fact silence, and that silence is there, in fact, to allow God to fill the space. Of course, within the desert tradition, there's enormous awareness that it's what's going on in our heads, even though we may experience physical silence. It's what's going on in our heads and hearts that, in fact, is going to determine whether or not we are growing closer to God, or we're just getting madder. So there used to be, and this is particularly within the monastic world, there used to be a variety of ways for people to bond to each other. Men and women working side by side, that creates a bond. Preparing a meal or planning a trip or a get-together, walking together, playing cards, all of these activities, in fact, provide a medium for building a bond of human connection, okay? As those kinds of activities in many of our lives have decreased, in fact, the need for conversation has increased, and the ability to carry on a conversation as a way to build meaningful relationships. There's, of course, plenty of wisdom literature about talking, and much of it is negative in tone. There's little imagination in the scriptures for the joy, the stimulation, the sense of well-being that comes to us from a good conversation with another person or with a group of people. For us as Benedictines, this is at least ironic. The English word closest to conversatio, which is that big, inclusive profession element, is conversation. In fact, if you try to type in conversatio into Word, Microsoft will immediately try to help you by converting it into conversation. In chapter 3 of the letter of James, the author compares the tongue to the rudder of a ship. And with graphic imagery, he invites us to become aware of the potential for both good and evil. And he writes this way: with the tongue, we bless the Lord and our Father, and with it, we curse human beings who are made in the image and likeness of God. From the same mouth come blessing and curse. And St. Benedict inherits that tradition, as well as the desert tradition's regard for silence. He constantly cautions against words that spring from a spirit of chronic complaining, crabbiness, criticizing, judging, and murmuring. And to nail this down, chapters 34, 35, 40, 41, 53, and elsewhere, okay? The comedian Lily Tomlin may be correct in her judgment that humans invented language so that we could complain. But Benedict does not give that view much wiggle room, okay? In chapter 4, Benedict urges us to avoid harmful or deceptive speech, to prefer moderation in speech, and to avoid foolish chatter. And in chapter 6, Benedict writes, we absolutely condemn in all places any vulgarity and gossip and talk leading to laughter. And we do not permit a disciple to engage in words of that kind. And chapter 43 comments that those who come late to prayer should not stand outside and end up engaging in idle chatter. And chapter 49, which is on Lent, urges us to do some penances, such as denying oneself some food, drink, sleep, needless talking, and idle jesting, okay? With the goal that we look forward to Holy Easter with joy and spiritual longing. An unquestioned positive use of speech is the praise of God. Each morning we speak the words, Lord, open my lips, and my mouth will proclaim your praise. We break the silence of night to praise the creating and saving wonder of God. There probably are other times when we want to say, oh, Lord, close my lips, So, if we made a list of the words we want to avoid, it would probably be fairly long. And it will probably include idle or adolescent chit-chat about every thought that flits through our mind, or words that inflict pain or harm or reopen old wounds. Words that do not let another person get a word in edgewise. Words that are heavy with cynicism and mockery. The words of off-color stories, or words of backbiting or detraction. Within the bounds of community, family, or friendships, we may also wittingly or unwittingly invade the private space of another. We may ask an innocent question, and we're suddenly aware, the way human beings are aware, that the other person doesn't want to go any further. And in the normal course of interaction, we learn about each other's families, each other's tastes in food, books, or music, and over time, each other's spiritual journey. But we can wear out our welcome by constantly checking up on what others are doing and why, when they're going to town and for what, who they talk to and what they talk about. When information about such things is freely offered, it is certainly proper to discuss it and to share my own experience. But it is another to put other people on the spot and to try to wrestle information from them. These are some of the areas where we need to be cautious with speech. Nevertheless, all of this said, in Cenobitic communities and in families and in all the relationships we have, conversation is vitally important. One measure of the health of a family or community is the level of conversation one finds there. do they speak to each other at all? Does their conversation always stay on the safe, superficial level of small talk? Do we ever get to issues of faith or love and trust? What is the level of empathy and compassion? The willingness to help carry the load. The truth is, we need all kinds of conversations that cover weather, baseball, how doomed the Vikings are, really, huh? Construction updates, news about health issues, but then also about our deepest hopes, our struggles with prayer, our struggles with faith, with Lectio, with life, and in our important relationships, with disappointment and failure, with frustration and sadness, where God seems to disappear, our work and what we make of it, our families, our sons and daughters and our grandkids. Oh my goodness, how are they doing? What are they struggling with? Where are their successes? Where have they been able to move forward? All of those kinds of things that have such an important, if you will, emotional freight and spiritual freight in our lives. Here I need to pick up another theme that occurs in the scriptures and in Benedict, and that's the subject of gossip. In the book of Sirach, okay, chapter 19, we read, "He or she who gloats over evil will meet with evil. And he who repeats an evil report has no sense. Never repeat gossip, and you will not be reviled. Let anything you hear die within you. Be assured it will not make you burst. When a fool hears something, he is in labor, like a woman giving birth to a child. Like an arrow lodged in a man's thigh is gossip in the breast of a fool. Admonish your friend, he may not have done it. And if he did, he may not do it again. Admonish your neighbor, he may not have said it. And if he did, he might not say it again. Admonish your friend, often it may be slander. You must not believe everything you hear. Then too, a man may slip and not mean it. Who has not sinned with his tongue? That's from the book of Sirach, chapter 19. A true treasure, at least in my mind. Small towns and communities and extended families, to make the connection, are notorious for gossip. Lake Wobegon has the Chatterbox Cafe. El Rosa has the Hans and Annie's Cafe. If one wanted to know what was going on in the latter community, one simply attended Mass and then stopped in at Hans and Annie's for a cup of coffee and a sweet roll. And it was a natural setting for, if you will, the updating on comings and goings, on who was getting married and who had not shown up to clean the church, who was pregnant and who was in the middle of some family difficulty. Lest this seem like an activity confined to women, men gathered at the creamery while it was still operating, or the implement store, the lumber yard, the grain elevator. And at any of these places, it was easy to get a sense of what was happening in the community. Who had bought a new tractor or combine, who was buying or selling land, or who was simply mad at whom. In our house, there was an almost absolute ban on gossip at the table, that is, talking about our neighbors or relatives. And this was not because we were virtuous. My parents were pretty sure that as kids, we would carry the stuff that was said at the table into school and other conversations. And that would be hurtful and harmful to people, especially if there was no context or the message was scrambled. One of the most negative impacts of gossip occurs when it is a mechanism for spreading rumors that have little or no basis in fact. As politicians long ago discovered, rumors are politically effective. And they're effective even if later shown to be false. The bias favors the rumor. Where there's smoke, there's fire. So even when a rumor is absolutely false, a residue remains. Men typically disparage gospel, understood as an interest in the details of others' lives. But in fact, as I noted earlier, our monastery is like a small town. Our lives do matter to each other. And the network of relationships has an intricacy similar to that of a small town. And for that reason, an interest in the details of each other's lives is, in fact, natural and intelligible. There is such a thing as healthy interest in each other, speaking about each other in a way that is respectful and honest, where there's a genuine interest in the good of another. But gossip that is talking against another is harmful. To discuss the weaknesses or character flaws and the failures of others so that the participants in the conversation can feel superior, that is probably the definition of gossip. There's also the issue of how I personally stand in relationship to information. If I have access to information, if that's a part of the way that I enhance my own self-esteem, then I may be in a position of a convert from the past whose comment would be something like, I know, but I can't say. Or I may be in a position of needing to share information. What does my being in the know mean to me? Is it bolstering my own sense of self-worth? Or I may be in a position of always pumping for information or looking for the inside track. And if I don't have the information, I guess at what is most probable. And that may be completely wrong, but I pass it along as fact, as if it came from the mountain. With respect to gossip, the words of Sirach are truly wisdom. There are times when we hear a piece of juicy gossip, and it's like a piece of really tasty bacon in the morning that begs to be shared. However, it is immediately obvious that it will do harm to another. And so we go into a confessional mode. It goes nowhere. If there's a way to speak directly to a person about it, we do so. Another, and I'm bringing this to a close here to be faithful to the time element here. Another area of ambiguity is, of course, the relationship between talk and silence. Sometimes we can have a bias towards silence when talk would be more healthy. Silence, as we all know, in community, in a family, it can be a weapon. In relationships that matter, we may give someone the silent treatment, and that is hold back our real thoughts and feelings as a way to frustrate or control another. Here, speaking, however challenging, is a way to reestablish the relationship. Sometimes silence can be a way to appear strong and confident or deep. Still waters run deep, the saying goes. Well, not necessarily. Sometimes we need to speak about our fears, our doubts, or we need to test our understanding. Am I getting this right? And not be afraid to risk looking a little bit foolish. Sometimes we may remain silent because we're afraid of our anger, that we could not speak to someone of our anger in a non-destructive, harmful, and human way. Ultimately, to process anger such as this, we are going to have to, when we get some kind of understanding of what's going on in us, we're going to have to talk it through with the person who matters to us. Sometimes we have such a tangle of emotions and desires that our inner life doesn't seem to make sense. And rather than risk an educated guess, we just zip it. We just stay low, huh? This is what women so often experience and comment about us in us as men, I think, huh? They'll be looking at us and saying, could you wager a hunch as to what the heck is going on inside of you, what you're feeling and thinking? We live in an age where notions of masculinity are in flux. As one quip has said it, if a man says something and there's no woman there to hear it, is it still wrong? Men, men in the presence of women often remain silent as a defensive precaution. The same kind of mechanism can play itself out in community. That is, we don't risk speaking what is in our minds and in our hearts because we don't trust the environment. The outcome of this is a group of men who have the same zip code, but no genuine companionship. Sometimes we remain silent because we think we have to say something either monumental or clever. An alternative is to speak, to risk our uncertainty, and to risk being with someone. Each one of us, I think, has had the experience of the power of a word from someone in a time of frustration or grief or sadness or depression, and someone who drew us into a conversation in which we were heard and affirmed. And each one of us has had the experience, I think, of being exhausted at lunch or supper. Our head is spinning, and there seems to be little energy to get through the rest of the day. And a decent conversation developed either at lunch or at the table, and it renewed our spirit. We've had the experience of a conversation that is free-flowing, that includes those who are present, and it is a liberating, healing phenomenon, a blessing of being in a family or in a community or in a marriage. So many different voices, such a diversity of talent and educational background, conversation at table, at work, and recreation. It has the capacity to lift us up, to make us better, more humane people. It can widen us and stretch us and give us a deeper understanding of ourselves and each other and of the God we serve in Jesus Christ. But surely this does not happen by accident. It is the result of 100 choices. For we cannot control or manipulate a real conversation. We don't know where it's going. And that's why it's such fertile ground for the work of the Holy Spirit, that wind that blows where it will. It seems that we need to tend to our talk, our conversation, with the same kind of attentiveness and awareness that we give to our silence. Okay? Thank you very much for your kind attention.